Hello and welcome to Fit After 40. Our guest today is Victor Vizcaino. Victor is a running coach. His company is Express Your Mission, or EYM. And Victor specializes in the marathon distance. Isn't that right? Welcome to the
Uh,
show.
Thank you. Thank you. It's a privilege to be here. I'm honored. Thank you for having me.
Oh, the pleasure is all mine. I promise you that. So let's start with your story. Tell me about yourself, your background in running, and what made you want to specialize in the marathon.
Story goes way back to when my sister actually asked me if I wanted to train for a marathon with her.
Mhm.
And when she first asked me, I thought she wanted me to actually run the marathon like in a couple of weeks from the day she told me. And I said, okay, yeah. And she said, I've done a couple of them. So I thought, if she can do it, I can do it. So I went on a 6 mile run. I practically died, and I thought,
Yeah.
you know what? Like, there's no way I can do 26 miles in 2 weeks. And then she's, no, dummy, the training starts in 2 weeks. So it was a 6 month training. And I said, okay, I can do it. I'll do it. I'll take on the challenge. But running wasn't my favorite thing. It was just,
Mhm.
I wanted to show my sister that I could do it. Once I did that marathon, I got hooked because right after I did that one, I thought, okay, I want to improve my time the
Sure.
next time. And somebody told me that if said, well, wow, if you can qualify for the Boston Marathon. My time was 3:42 and I needed like
Okay.
a 3:15, I believe at the time.
It's
It
fast.
was, yeah, that is very fast. But in my mind, I didn't know a lot about running. I thought, oh, with the time that I spent walking and all this time that I wasted, I thought I can shave 35 minutes, no problem, in the next
Yeah.
marathon. But it actually took me 17 marathons and 6 years to qualify for the Boston Marathon. And by that time, I was pretty hooked.
Yeah. Wow. So you didn't know enough to know how hard it is, because Boston is that is a hell of a prize. I mean, in my mind, finishing a marathon in any time is an accomplishment, but qualifying for Boston, that really is the holy grail of distance running, isn't it?
Yes, yeah, and especially when you start at an older age. I think I was 38 when I started running. Mm.
Well, as they say, getting older is nothing if not an opportunity to qualify for Boston, right?
Yes. And I think the I did experience the runner's high, and so I started to
Sure.
enjoy doing the long runs. Mm. The other thing is, yeah, just doing the long
Hmm.
runs started to be something that I look forward to doing. And I was working for UPS at the time as a
Hmm.
driver. So I started to feel that it complemented each other. I felt like running was helping me at my job, and that my
Sure.
job was also helping me at my running because it was sort of like an active recovery. As soon as I
Right.
got done my runs in the morning, I'd go run all day for
Right.
UPS.
Wow. Uh, wow. Talk about an active lifestyle. A lot of people who sit at desks all day would be jealous of that. So when it comes to training, um, can you compare how you train for a marathon compared to how you train for other distances? Like a 5K or even a half. How is it different?
I think the main difference would be the volume. So
Hmm.
of course, for a full marathon, you're gonna do maybe 3 to 4 around the 20 miler. We
Hmm.
don't usually do more than 20 miles because it takes a long time to recover from a 20 miler,
Right.
especially if it's going to be your first marathon. Mm, So that would be the big difference when you're doing for speed, like anything uh, under a half marathon, like a 10K or 5K, then
Sure.
you're doing short workouts.
Yep.
It's almost like a speed workout, but a little
Yeah.
bit more than, your track workouts, but it's still shorter than a full marathon.
Yeah. I should tell you that I have done ultra distances before, some 30 milers or 50 kilometers. I am training for my first road marathon as we speak. So there's more than a little bit of personal interest in this conversation, as well as I hope some value for our listeners. But I'm really interested in hearing what you have to say. Because like I said, I'm in the middle of it right now. I've got a 15-mile training run coming up this weekend that I am both excited about and a little bit intimidated by. But that's
And
where
what
I
is
am in the training is the 15. I'm doing
the
Pittsburgh.
Pittsburgh, and it's 15 milers?
Oh, well, I'm doing a 15. My training run this week is 15.
Oh, okay.
That's
But
my
you're doing a
long
full
run.
marathon.
Yeah.
Um,
Yeah. So it's my
okay.
first road marathon. Like I said, I've done some ultra distances on trails, but that's such a different experience.
Yeah. And what is the, is it, are you wanting to do a certain time or do you just want to finish?
My target time is around probably 4:15, 4:20,
Okay.
somewhere in there.
Yeah.
And my training supports that as a reasonable goal. I'd like to qualify for Boston, but I know I'm not that fast. So
Okay. Yeah,
more
it's
speed work, right?
more speed work. Yeah. The track workouts are key for improving your speed. And that's what's the difference in training adults for running marathon is that it all depends on what they're trying to do. And for the most part,
Sure.
new marathoners is just to finish the marathon. And
Just
so it's
finish.
they're basically wanting to put the mileage, do it in a way that they're not going to get injured and they're going to have a good time. And of course, it almost happens almost every time that if they had a good time, they're going to want to do it again. Because
Of
then the
course,
second time, they say, okay, I want to do a little better.
get a better time. That's right.
Yeah.
So if you were to characterize your philosophy um, in coaching and in training for the marathon distance, how would you describe your overall philosophy?
Philosophy is one of a holistic approach is, of course, start slow. Um, don't get too excited. Once you start running and experiencing, especially when you experience the runner high, it's easy to your ego to get a little bit optimistic and start to train too hard. And that's when injuries happen and things can go downhill. So basically, take it slow, take your pace, stick to a training plan.
Hmm. So you think that a training plan is essential for success?
Yes, absolutely. And enjoy the process. I think that's the big one too, is not to get too hung up on time, especially if it's going to be your
Sure.
first marathon. Just enjoy the process, take it slow, and do some cross training is
Yeah,
essential so that you don't overuse just those muscles that may have some
absolutely.
weakness.
So my cross
And,
training usually involves a bike. What types of cross training do you recommend with the athletes you work with?
Swim and bike.
Swim and
Those
bike.
two,
Okay.
the bike is definitely probably the first one that I would choose, and then second it would be the swim.
Okay.
And then if you can incorporate a little bit of weights to strengthen specific muscles, better. Most people are limited in time because if they're training for a marathon, they're already having a lot. But if they can squeeze in bike and swim for those recovery runs, instead of doing a
Sure.
recovery run, they can always do a little more time on the bike. And the swim is amazing for building your core muscles
Sure.
and your upper body strength. And people underestimate how much it makes a difference in your
Hmm.
performance when it comes to running.
And swimming is also incredibly beneficial for your VO2 max, right? Because you control your breathing. Isn't that correct?
Yes, yes, it definitely does wonders in your breathing exercise,
Hmm.
exercising your lungs, and because you can't basically breathe underwater, so unless
Right.
you get a snorkel or something, but other than that, you have to breathe a certain way. But
Sure.
on top of it is the fact that you can still get some aerobic
Hmm.
exercise without the without as much risk of injury.
Sure. Sure.
So with my clients, I actually plan on, in case you get injured, here's some of the things that we're going to do.
Hmm.
Because a lot of people think injuries when they're running just in running, but there's a lot of people that have jobs like I did, or they go skiing and do other activities where they can easily get injured doing something else. And I would say that at the beginning, doing the long miles puts them at risk when they do other activities because they're fatigued and their muscles, and they don't take into account that they're going to do that activity if they're going to play tennis or they're going to do skiing, that some of those muscles are already fatigued and therefore they're not going to function quite the same. When I was working at UPS at the beginning, I would all of a sudden trip as I'm going up, up
Right.
on the truck because my legs were tired, and all of a sudden they didn't respond quite the same. So, what is going to be the activity that you're going to do if you sprain an ankle, for example? Okay, do you have access to a pool? Can you do
Hmm.
running in water running so that we'll continue to stay fit while recovering from the injury? Because what it was, I was hearing a lot from beginners or people who decided not to run anymore. It's like, no, I got injured one time and I couldn't run anymore. But for a lot of them, it was like, I just stopped
Right.
exercising. And it's like, okay, there's
Oh,
a lot of things you can do with a sprained ankle where you can still work
sure.
your upper body, all these other things. So yeah, having that into your plan, incorporating that into your
Mhm.
plan, I think is essential.
So what? So you mentioned the sprained ankle. What other injuries do you commonly see with people who are kind of overdoing it with their training?
Well, at the beginning, the most common is the shin splints because they're not
Okay.
used to that pounding. So, and that's a good sign that they started a little too fast and they're landing wrong, and also proper shoe. But the main reason is they're going too fast too soon. So that takes care a little bit of that, mm, slowing down and strengthening the calf, strengthening all the other
Okay.
muscles at the same time. The next injury would probably, I would say, plantar fasciitis,
Sure.
and that's usually because their calves are too tight. Same thing, slow down, stretch those calves. Usually it's because they're too tight, and massaging them, stretching them helps relieve some of the tension on the plantar
Okay.
fasciitis. It's the For people who don't know where plantar fasciitis, it's that
Hmm.
um, tissue at the bottom of your foot.
Right. Right. It becomes inflamed. Right.
Right. And it can be
And
painful.
so how do you, so if someone is injured, how do you keep them, how do they keep their training up without worsening the injury? I mean, how do you coach this? Yeah, you mentioned swimming, cycling. Do you have other
Yes.
strategies? You mentioned strength
Yeah.
training too. So maybe you could walk me through what that looks like.
So that's a good indication that, for example, the other common injury is the IT band, the
Oh,
tibialis,
sure.
and that's what I suffered, and it was due to overtraining on the bike. I just went out
Mm,
on a on 100-mile ride when I didn't know how to ride a bike, and just full blast, thinking I didn't hear too many people getting injured on bikes other than falling. So I
right.
thought I'd be fine going up these hills, and all of a sudden my um, IT band started hurting and I couldn't go up a hill. I had to come down from the bike, and then it was just very painful. And what I did for training was run in the pool because I was training for a full Ironman at the time.
Oh, wow.
So it's like I can't afford to
Oh,
not
wow.
run or
You can't miss a
train
workout.
right. And just back and forth running in the pool.
Hmm.
One of the things you have to do is get yourself those special shoes, because what I experienced is that the bottom of the pool can be very harsh on the palm of your feet from
Huh.
running. So it's essential. One of the things you get is those shoes for the water. Forgot what they call them. Other things that people get is a belt, floating belt.
Hmm.
And if the belt's going to help you if you really cannot put any pressure on the feet, any weight. So you're basically just kind of swimming with your feet or putting
Right.
very little weight on them. Uh,
Yeah.
there are other things more sophisticated, like now they have zero gravity treadmills. I don't know if you heard of that.
No, I don't know that. What is that?
That's a treadmill where I don't know, I haven't tried it, but from what I heard, it's they inflate it. So you're basically almost, it's taking all your weight off. And I don't know if they're using air to float it, but they're in,
Hmm.
like you're in like an enclosed bubble and on a treadmill and you're running. So it's taking all of the weight off your feet, or not
Huh.
all of it, but most of it.
Right, right. Some of the
Yeah.
impact, yeah. Yeah,
Yeah.
and it's interesting you point out that the IT band, a lot of these injuries may not occur with the muscles, but with the connective tissues, which are slower to condition than your muscles are. So
Right.
that's an important consideration that not a lot of people think about.
So with the IT band, for example, because you did say what do they do about it, or how do you
Hmm.
strength training some of that to prevent those? So when you get like an IT band, it's definitely overused, but it's also a good indication that you may have weak muscles in your hips or other areas. That's where it pays to go to a chiropractor or
Ah,
somebody that can look and it's like say, hey, you need to strengthen certain areas and maybe do some analysis on how you're either biking or running and suggest some strength training for those specific
great.
muscles.
And you do coach the strength training as part of the overall marathon training process. You do have exercises you go to, some of the split squat stuff, single leg stuff is what I like.
Yeah, some lunges, the
Sure.
bands, resistant bands, all of those. If you can
Yeah.
incorporate that, especially if they're starting to separate certain seasons. If it's a
Hmm.
person who's done three or four, then they're gonna get used to, it's a season where you can focus more on strength training, and as you get
Right.
closer to the marathon, you start to get more specific.
Sure. Sure. So, in your opinion, why do you think the marathon is such a special distance? I mean, we run all kinds of distances, everything from a 5K up to, Tony here does 100 milers. But why is the marathon so iconic?
I don't think I know the exact answer. I'm just speculating.
Well, why is it special to
Speculating.
you?
To me, it was what my sister suggested, and then I started
Hmm.
finding out how many people actually do this crazy thing of marathon, and every year it just got more and more popular, and more cities
Hmm.
do this whole celebration of a marathon. So I just started focusing on that, and that was my sort of graduation
Mm.
party. I started to
Yeah.
look at it that way. It's like, okay, I like getting in shape. I like training. I was doing like weightlifting, but when I was
Sure.
doing weightlifting, there wasn't like this event where you get to showcase your progress. Whereas with the marathon, it's like, oh, I'm getting ready for this marathon, and then the marathon comes and this huge celebration of your progress. It's going to be how well you do, how you enjoy it,
Sure.
and how you
Mhm.
suffer with some
Yeah.
kind of dignity.
The suffering's part of it, but the party's part of it too. You're right. And one of the things that makes, I ran the Pittsburgh half last year, and I was so impressed with the way they organized the event, the support the community came out and just how well organized it was. That's what made me want to go back there and do the full. So that festive atmosphere, that supportive atmosphere really is just such an important part of the experience.
Yes, yes. And I think that's what's missing sometimes from the bigger races. You don't have as much support or
Hmm.
audience. You don't have it quite as much. And I know they even have now like double Ironmans where
Oh,
you have to hire your own support.
Yeah.
It can get expensive too.
an Iron Man alone is such an incredible. So my goal, I would like to do a 70.3 Iron Man. A full Iron Man is such a thing. I don't know if I'll ever
It's
get there,
big.
but a 70.3, a half Iron Man, that seems attainable. I just swimming is the big obstacle there for me, but yeah, no, I'm working on it.
Good, good.
So
Yeah.
as we dig into kind of the specifics on training, maybe we could start with just an overview. So when you're working with a runner, maybe it's somebody who's done a bunch of 5Ks and maybe a half marathon, but maybe it's their first marathon. How many days a week do you have them out running? Just the running portion.
Uh, at least five.
Okay.
They could get away with four if they're doing some serious cross training, but
Hmm.
typically about 5 days and leaving
Hmm.
two for recovery
Hmm.
and maybe active recovery as well, depending on their
Sure.
fitness level.
Gotcha. So active recovery would be at least one of those days. So some
Yeah.
spinning or some swimming. And then do you recommend one full rest day, or do you have them do active recovery both off days?
I think that also depends on their fitness level and their age. The older
Sure.
we get, the more we recover. Then I would definitely, if it's an older gentleman or woman, re a full day of recovery is a must.
I find that if I take a full day of recovery off, my performance the next day is greatly improved. So for me, I try to take one full rest day each week. But
Yeah. And you're still
you know,
young, so
well, I'm not as
yeah.
young as I once was. I'll be 45 here in a couple of weeks.
None of us are.
So
No, that's still
that's
good.
right.
Uh,
When you're breaking up the workouts that you recommend, when you're talking about, so we already mentioned, my long run is going to be on Sunday. I'm doing some speed work this afternoon, just a short 4 miler, but sprint intervals. So how do you recommend we break up this running routine in terms of zone two versus recovery runs? How do you break it up?
Well, the first thing is I like to incorporate the 80-20 rule where 80% of your time is doing zone two.
Absolutely.
And then
mhm.
if preferably if you can do the speed workout, if you're doing your long run on Sunday, I kind of like to put them on the Wednesday. That way they're far from your long run. You're recovered enough and you
Separate
can
it
do
as
the
much as you can.
yeah. Yeah, and then in between is the easy run, the cross training, the tempo runs on Thursday,
Hmm.
and fartlek on Friday, and some hills, depending
Sure.
on what race you're getting ready. If it's a hilly race, definitely incorporating some hill runs during the
Yeah.
week is great.
And
Hill
and and
repeats.
maybe for those who aren't as accustomed to running, you could explain what a tempo run is and what fartleks are, if you don't mind.
Yes, tempo run is going to be pretty much you find a good rate that you want to run at and try to stick to that,
Hmm.
that it's a little bit fast, but not like the sprints or the track
Right.
workouts. And the fartlek is doing fast and slow, kind of
Right.
alternating, where you're running slow and you speed up towards that end of a marker, maybe within a mile, and
Hmm.
have different speed, and that's the fartlek.
It's like a speed day, basically.
Yes, yes,
Yeah.
like doing a speed day, but within the not a long run, but
Hmm.
a medium run.
Yeah.
Whereas if you're doing it on the track, you would focus on different short distances like 400s, 800s.
Yeah. So that the track work, your sprint intervals are generally under 60 seconds, right? We're looking here at type 2 muscle fiber engagement, correct?
Yes, they can be. I mean, if you do it, you can do a full mile intervals as well, or what they do, the pyramid, where you're
Yeah, we
running,
usually.
do the pyramids.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah, and those are very common doing the pyramids for track workouts where you do 200, 400, and 800 and 1,000, then back down 800s and
Oof.
repeats. The one I like is the Yaso 800, and that's when I discovered that formula, the Yaso 800s for predicting your marathon times. I think that's why I started to focus on that because somebody told me that the 800s equal in minutes to the marathon. So for example, if I could run an 800 in 3 minutes 20 seconds, that would equal a marathon in 3 hours and 20 minutes.
Oh, wow. Which is, well, it's not a Boston qualifying time this year. This year I've heard it's 3:05, but it's pretty close. That would qualify you for some of the
Yeah.
majors, wouldn't it? 3:20.
Well, it depends on your age because they go by age
Of
Yeah.
group.
course. Of course. Yeah.
Is that what you need? A
Uh,
305?
I think I need a three. I think it's 40 something. I think mid 40s. I think it's 3:05 this year. I
Wow.
looked it up and
Yeah,
it was, it
that's
was
It's gotten
incredibly
harder.
fast.
It's gotten a lot harder. You almost need to go to downhill. That's why the downhill races have become so popular.
Tell me more about this.
Chris, just to give you a real quick update there, though, as soon as you turn 45, you got 3 hours and 20 minutes. So actually, there you go.
All right.
Oh, see, it's
So
not as
2026
yeah,
is my year.
Yeah.
there you go. Um, yeah, so the those Yasso 800s, of course, it's not like you do one and then you can, oh, I can do a 3 but if you
Right.
can do one, now you can say, okay, if I can keep 8 of those in a row where you're running 800s in 3 minutes 20 seconds for uh 8 times in a row, then you know that is a realistic goal.
Hmm.
Because the
Hmm.
best predictor is going to be your half marathon.
Sure.
But the
Sure.
Yassos kind of give you a good idea of if you're having a really hard time doing 3 minutes and 20 seconds for 800, then you know you may be shooting a little too optimistic.
And of course, that's where the risk of injury really spikes. If you're trying to push too hard too fast, you're just going to end up hurting yourself.
Correct.
So,
Yes,
do you
absolutely.
Yeah.
work with athletes on nutrition, Victor?
Very little.
Okay.
Usually like the basic, like the most of my clients that come to me kind of know if, for example, they're drinking too much alcohol or they're
Well,
eating way too much sugar. And so I work on that. Hey, what can we do to fix that? And then just general stuff that they in the general sense, not specific
hmm,
diets or anything. I rather if they really have issues on being specifically on nutrition, I recommend a nutritionist or a dietitian.
sure.
But the basics,
Gotcha.
yeah, let's not eat a ton of bread, or if you can stick to whole foods, the better, less processed food, just kind of like the more of your basic knowledge of nutrition, but I
Hmm.
don't get into specifics.
Sure.
A little bit
So
on race day, for example, or your training days, what you take while you're running, those kind of things.
yeah, that's where I was going to kind of go there is that seems to be a big topic. And of course, marathon running is a little different than ultra running, where like, of course, in ultra running, fueling is a huge issue and your stomach, your gut going is a huge issue during a race. So what kind of advice are you giving to your athletes about how to fuel during their event?
One is to not don't try anything new on race day. Stick to what you
Yeah.
train with, and that's when you start to experiment what works. Mm.
Hmm.
Hmm.
I belong to a triathlon club, and I think you hit the nail in the head when you said the longer the distance, the more the nutrition plays a role. Because a half Ironman is very different from a full Ironman in the nutrition aspect. You know, you can
Hmm.
get away with a lot of things in a half Ironman that you cannot get away with on a full Ironman. If you do the nutrition right, I mean, if you do the nutrition wrong, you can pay a big price.
Yeah,
Absolutely.
it's definitely the make or break. So in a marathon, do you find most of your athletes, don't I'm not super familiar with the fueling in a marathon, honestly. I used to run some half marathons and stuff like that, but a lot of times, I know with the times and the speeds people run marathons at, there's not enough time to like, you're not stopping at aid station, sitting down by the campfire for a couple minutes and eating, drinking a cup of broth or anything like that because
Right.
you don't want to waste any time. It's a little bit
Yeah.
different fueling environment than maybe I'm used to at like a 100-mile race, for instance. So,
Yes. And, depending on the athlete, if he's going to be there out there for 3 hours and like 3 hours and 20 minutes, I,
yeah.
I usually find that every 45 minutes, a gel is going to be plenty because that's going to be
Hmm.
four
Just,
gels and you're fine as long as you took a little bit right before, about a half an hour to an hour before the race. You did some carbs. I used to do potatoes, just boil
Hmm.
them and have them about 30, 45 minutes before the race, and then
mhm,
gel every 45 minutes, and I was fine. But what I found is other athletes who are going to be out there for 4 or 5 hours,
yeah.
mm, then they have to make sure that they do stick to those um, taking those gels either
Hmm.
more often or just You don't miss a gel because I found that with the marathon at 3 hours 20 minutes, if you miss a gel at a time that you were supposed to, it's not gonna make a big difference unless you're already feeling it, you're already feeling a
Sure.
little dizzy or you're feeling like you're running through the things. But in a 4 or 5 hour, your sugar levels can fluctuate a little bit much. You can run too low if you didn't take those gels.
Definitely feel that on a bike century too, because that's, my century time is, last year it was around 6 hours, and if in with that amount of time, you absolutely need to pay attention to your nutrition. Otherwise, you're going to find yourself getting dizzy, and you're dizzy 50 miles down a country road with nobody around. People
Yeah.
get very spread out on those types of events.
Yeah, and you don't want to wait until you start to feel like you don't, just like you don't want to wait until you're thirsty to start hydrating. You want
Breaking.
to hydrate before
Hmm.
you're thirsty. Same thing when you're doing a long race. You want to take that nutrition before you start feeling the symptoms because it might be a little too late
Yeah.
once you start feeling dizzy or and your body may not absorb it. I know that I've experienced that in an Ironman where doesn't matter what you take at the end of the race, it's just not going to stay
Yeah.
and
Right.
you're not going to absorb it.
Oh, and the GI symptoms during a long endurance event are, well, it's absolutely no fun.
No. And that's where I
Absolutely no
like,
fun.
you forget those painful areas. And when I volunteered at a station towards the end of the race, that's where like, oh, I forgot. Because you could start to see the people coming in and pale or some athletes who are just not going to make the times, but they're done, but they don't want to give up. But you can see it in
Yeah.
their face that like this
Yeah.
person is done. And then you think it's like, oh, that's why I'm not doing full Ironmans anymore.
So when you're coaching an athlete, how important is form, their running form, and how do you coach their running form?
When I'm doing online, it's kind of hard because I'm not there to observe how they run, but
Sure.
I give little tips on how to stay with good form. One is making sure they remind themselves to not look down, or if they're looking down, they're not hunched over to where their head is pointing down, putting pressure on the glutes and the spine. So preferably if they can look at the horizon. Of course, trail runs, you have to keep an eye on the ground, but don't hunch or don't stick your
Hmm.
head down to put pressure. The other thing, if it's a sunny day and you can watch your shadow, it's a good way to see your form on the shadow while you're running.
Oh, that's a good
And,
idea.
Oh
and
yeah.
if
Never
you're
thought of
running
that.
in a group, you can see the shadows also for your vertical isolation. You can see compare it with your partner's shadow. And if your head's going up and down on your shadow, it's like, oh, you're spending too much energy up and down to where maybe you can get it more steady uh, and not
Hmm.
do the hopping up and down.
Right.
So a lot
Which
of little
increases
things like
capacity.
that. You
Yeah.
should have a little bit of a lean forward, not hunch, and to remind them when you get tired, pay more and more attention. And that's where usually people's form go to the wayside is they get tired and their body starts doing things that they are not aware of. I was a pacer on one of the marathons here in Coeur d'Alene, Idaho, and the guy at the beginning said, "Oh, are you the 4 hour pacer?" And I said, "Yes." "Oh, I might follow you, but that's a little bit fast for me." But anyway, he went faster than my pace, and I
Oh,
caught up to
wow.
him at mile 24, and I could see he was hunched over, and he like, oh, his posture was horrible. And he asked me, "Are you still on time for the 4 hours?" I said, "Yeah, and so are you." I told him, "But you need to straighten up.
Hmm.
Yeah.
You're putting way too much pressure on your glutes. Just stand up and look forward. Don't look down." And he took off, and he beat me by quite a bit. I had to stay with a 4 hour pace, of course, but
Sure.
Yeah.
he got there in front of me. He just thanked me. He was ready to sort of give up.
Yeah.
And that's how much a difference the posture makes over a 26-mile run.
Absolutely. And if your
'Cause-
posture's bad, you could run into back aches, neck aches, headaches, lots of symptoms that you don't immediately associate with bad posture that can manifest when you're running for 3, 4, 5 hours.
Yes, and that's where like mindful running comes in play where my training, because I love to count my cadence. And I don't know how many people do that just automatic. 'Cause I just started doing that when people were encouraged me to be present. And it's like, well, how can you be present if my mind just likes to wander when I'm running? And counting my cadence allowed me to stay present. And so as I'm counting my cadence per minute, I would try to be as accurate as possible. So
Mhm.
when I was trying to increase the cadence, then I would count as like, how accurate am I getting to my, I think at the time I was trying to get to 92 revolutions per minute. So I would count them and see how accurate I was. And if I lost my count, then that was a good indication that I was not present. My mind
Right.
would wander, kind of like meditation. And so you
Mhm.
can practice that and then just incorporating little things. It's like as I'm counting, am I noticing where my foot is landing? Am I noticing how much my elbows are swinging? Is my head looking down? So you can focus in little increments. It's like this minute, as I count my cadence, my focus is going to be don't look down, or my focus is going to
Mhm.
be land on my forefoot.
When you're training athletes, do you train cadence? I mean, I know there's like a lot of people just train at trying to keep that 180, on cadence on their watch, for instance. Do you train cadence in your athletes?
Yes, but it also depends on what they tell me. Is like, do you know what your cadence are? And most of the time they'll say, no, I have no idea. And it's like,
Yeah.
or, oh, they're gonna go look at their watch. So that tells me they're not really aware. It's like, oh no, let me look. So they're
Yeah.
not aware of their cadence and they use their electronics to see it afterward. But yes, I definitely like them to be more aware or just for being present to practice that presence. It's like every once in a while, pay attention to your cadence. Where are they at? Because you can switch it off and on to a little bit higher, a little bit lower, depending on your speed and also depending on whether you are going up a hill. So if you're going up a
Hmm.
hill, I like to have shorter, or if you're going steep downhill, also get your cadence or your stride a little shorter.
Mhm.
This- Something that one of our previous guests we had on here was a professional marathon runner named Patrick Rizzo, and I used to run with him some. And something I always observed with him, he runs a 2:13 marathon, is he maintains his cadence consistently all the time, and he just lengthens and shortens his stride.
Yeah.
Is that sort of
Yeah.
your kind of the goal
Yes.
you're going up for there?
And that's what I mean by gear. So that's what I feel compared to the bike, and where the
Yeah.
bike you switch gears and you still try to keep the same cadence by switching down a gear when you're going uphill and still keep a high cadence. Same thing with running. If you can keep it consistent, but switch your stride, then that's like gear changing. You're changing a different gear
I
because
Mhm.
see.
that's going to make a big difference too, and the wear and tear also on your body. Uh,
Mhm. Yeah.
Switching the stride, I think, puts a little bit less pressure on specific muscles.
It's interesting you talk about cadence. When I am trying to focus on my cadence, I actually find it's easier to focus on my arms than my feet. And if I need to speed up my cadence, I focus on my arms, and that it's all connected, right? So it does speed up
Yeah.
my cadence, but for some reason in my brain, I connect more easily with the arms than with
Oh,
the feet. It's just
and
an interesting observation.
but it makes sense because I think that what I found when I switch from counting with my legs to counting with my arms is that the attention now goes to engaging more of those muscles that are related to the arms, and it takes a little bit of
Mhm.
pressure off the legs. But I notice that when I'm doing a race where I notice I'm fatigued and my legs are starting to ache. But if I count with my arms, then the attention goes away from the legs
Right.
and into the arms. And I think I'm speculating that you're engaging more of your upper body now because you're counting with your arms. and therefore giving a little bit of a break to your legs. But of course, it's not scientifically proven.
That's where my attention is, so it feels that way. And so
Yeah,
if it makes me feel refreshed and gets my cadence up, then if it's not broken, don't fix it, I say, right?
exactly.
Yep.
Yeah, it's all these little mind games. Whatever helps you apply it.
How much of the marathon do you think is physical, and how much of it do you think is mental?
I haven't put a number, but I would just say the 80-20 rule applies to everything. It's like
Yeah, yeah, fair, fair.
where but which one is 80, which one is 20? I would say, gosh, that's a tough one. I think that
It's a lot of mental. If
yeah, let's say
you
80
could be the
mental,
fittest guy in
20,
the
yeah.
world,
Let's do that. 80
you won't.
So I always, and this may be different in that distance, but the way I always typically look at it is I think that that's a moving target, like the percentage that's mental versus a percentage that's physical. And the reason I say that is because I know in longer runs when I do those, the first half of the run, first half of something like the first half of a marathon, you were probably powering through on your physical ability at that point. But what
Hmm.
really separates you is in that latter half when you're already got have the fatigue. That's when you really have to have the mental strength, I think, to pull through it. I always, say that the last half of an ultra is always just kind of my mind battling my own mind because the body's
Hmm.
fine enough, it's still moving. So I don't know.
Yeah.
That would be my thought. Is it's kind of a moving target as to what that percentage is.
Or maybe the
Yeah.
last
Yeah.
third, but
Yeah,
wherever it is where your brain starts to play tricks on you, where that's where you
yeah.
win or lose, right? I mean, it's up here for sure.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And how you prepared probably, because if you can have the confidence that you did the work, you put in the miles, it's when you
Good
took those
point.
shortcuts that then the mind starts like, well, I should have I should have done
Yeah.
this or I should have done that.
Yikes.
But if you prepared well, I don't know if you guys experience runner's high, but it's something that all of a sudden happens like your body 1 second is crying pain and then all of a sudden it's gone and like you're running on dopamine or some other brain chemical where I feel high just in my fantasy world where it starts to really feel euphoric and something just says you're
Yeah.
going to be fine. Yeah, you're in pain, but you got this. And you don't know where it comes. All you know is that you feel it all of a sudden. It's like, oh my God, 1 minute I can't seem to make it to the next mile marker, and all of a sudden something kicks in. And it's like, oh, it's gone. I know I can do it.
Or I could at least make it to that tree,
Yeah. I mean
you
that's
know?
always the thing too, I think with distance is people always remind maybe some of you reminder athletes, is and I like to remind people just about distance running in general. Like if you feel really, really bad, that doesn't mean you're going to stay that way the entire time. You might feel better later on in that race. And you have to like psychologically remind yourself like that because things can change so quickly over a long race. A marathon's a long race. You got 3, 4,
Yep.
5 hours out there. So there's a lot of things that happen over that time period. And what you're
Yeah.
feeling now is not going to be what you're feeling maybe in 20 minutes. So
Yeah.
Exactly. And also at the beginning, when I used to run the first time that I ran marathons, I wasn't as aware of the course elevation. So that gradually, there's sometimes like the LA Marathon had this gradual uphill where you start fatiguing, but you don't see it, you don't realize that you're going uphill, so you're just thinking your body's just giving up. And but if you study the course or more experienced runner, it's like, yeah, when I get to mile 12, it's going to start going downhill. So you just pace yourself appropriately for the uphill and then
Hmm.
get the down, knowing that okay, this is going to be harder because it is an uphill. It's going to feel harder than I think your body adjusts and your mind adjusts
Yeah.
appropriately.
So let me ask you something. If you've got an athlete that lives in a really, really flat area and they want to run a marathon course that has some more hills, for example, I think I might do the San Francisco marathon in July, and that's got a lot more elevation than I'm likely to train with. How do you coach that? How can I train on a flatter course for these hillier courses?
One is the treadmill. If you can have access to a treadmill that has a nice
Use
incline,
the incline.
use the incline on a treadmill, bleachers at the track,
Oh,
repeats.
run upstairs. Yeah,
Yeah, went
that's
upstairs and Stairmaster. Although my sister says that it doesn't quite substitute running up hills when you're doing the Stairmaster. Um, yeah, the best, of course, if you can get to the hills is the best.
yeah,
But
Are
in absence of that, yeah, I would think that the incline and the stairs,
running.
and
Yeah.
then strengthening those quads, strengthening those
And I was going to ask
hamstrings.
about cross training. So
Oh
that's where
yeah.
cross training comes in handy
Yes,
as
the
well.
bike, you can definitely, and most trainers, you can assume uphill climbing, especially if you have a smart trainer.
Yeah,
Right now, I have my bike on a smart trainer and been doing a lot of hills, and they can
yeah,
get pretty tough. But you can
yep.
feel it. You feel those hamstrings, you feel those glutes getting stronger.
Mm-hmm.
are either of you familiar with the runner Casey Lichtig?
No.
No.
She's won Western States 100 a few times and always top 10 female, just a phenomenal runner. And she lives in Nebraska. And
Oh,
she
that's
runs 100
totally
mile trail
flat.
races. Yeah. And she trains on flat all the time. And somehow she just puts in the volume and she's
Oh,
able to pull off wins at, like, of course, like Western States, which is in the Sierra Nevada mountains. It's kind of an amazing thing that
that's
someone could even
incredible.
take an environment like that and turn it
Yeah.
into a victory on a hilly course. But
Has,
Hmm.
just a random thought.
does she do the treadmill or it's all outside?
Mostly outside is her training method. It's just outside on basically the same kind of square blocks in her neighborhood. So
Oh, wow. Yeah,
kind of
because I would
amazing.
think that in the winter that gets a little
Yeah.
challenging.
Oof.
Yeah.
Nebraska in the winter is probably challenging, regardless of what you're doing.
Regardless of that, yes,
Yeah,
absolutely.
but if it's flat,
So,
it does make it a little bit easier because even for driving the UPS truck, where it's like you can deal with snow and ice in the flat versus have to climb somewhere where there's ice, it's just
Right.
not gonna
yeah.
happen. It's not gonna go very well.
Yeah. So
So
Victor, when you have a new athlete that comes to you for coaching, tell me about your initial evaluation when you're trying to gauge where they are. What are you looking at so that you could prepare a training plan that kind of meets them where they are, gives them room to grow, but something that's attainable?
Their experience, did they, if they ran a half marathon and they can give me the time and how long was that? Give me,
Hmm.
yeah, get a good sense of what kind of type of workouts are they doing at the moment.
Hmm.
Um, if it's going to be where they're coming straight from the couch, then it's going to be definitely a raw beginner's training
Sure.
plan, very gradual, slow, and start discovering as we go. That's why I like to meet with them once a week
Hmm.
so that I know how did that workout feel, what did you face, and then start to adjust it as we
Sure.
go. With somebody with experience, then it's just asking more questions, including what's the reason behind them wanting to do it? Are they trying to beat a certain time? Are they trying to
Hmm.
qualify for Boston, for example? That's going to make the difference on how aggressive we get on their training.
Hmm.
Um, and basically, I did have a client that wanted to do the New York Marathon.
Sure.
And at first, she just said, I just want to finish. I don't care about the time. I just want to finish. But she had really good workouts. She did Orange Theory a few times a week where she did amazing workouts. It was pretty intense workouts. And so I was keep thinking, wow, she could probably run faster than she thinks. But we just went with the let's stick to I think it was like around 5 hours. I want to be faster than 5 hours, she decided.
Sure.
But she was so excited about the marathon because I said I told her you're gonna get hooked just by your excitement. You're gonna get
Right.
no, I'm not those. I'm just doing it because somebody had signed her up for the New York Marathon, and so she did it. But this is it. I don't want to run marathons. I'm not like you, she said. I'm like,
Yeah,
Not
and I said,
yet.
not
not
yet.
yet. That's what I said. Okay, that's it. And sure enough, after she ran the first marathon, she contacted me like 6 months later. Yeah, I signed up again.
That's
I was
right.
like,
That's right.
I knew it. Okay,
Can't do
but
just
then
one.
she shaved off 43 minutes. So she was like
Wow.
4:42, and then the next time she was under 4 hours.
That's
And that was
remarkable.
huge. Yeah, that
That's a
was
Yeah.
big
huge. But
jump.
that's how she was well in shape, and she was 50. He had just turned 50 years old, so it was
Oh,
even
that's
more
amazing.
recalling with given her age and giving that was her second marathon.
That's incredible. That's a great time. I mean, sub 4 hours is a solid accomplishment, I think, really for anybody. And
Yes,
someone in their 50s, that's all the more so. So
absolutely.
in your evaluations, do you prefer how the athlete feels, like their perceived exertion, or are you looking at the heart rate data and that kind of thing? Which or all of the
Um,
above?
all of the above, but I prefer the perceived
Hmm.
exertion because I don't trust a lot of the accuracy of the heart rates, but if they can tell me here's how I felt, then I go with that. I'll give that more weight uh,
Hmm.
than than if they tell me where their heart rate was and how accurate that was. And I feel like a lot of athletes, if they begin too much with technology, they use it as an excuse.
Yeah.
They'll
I
start to use it
identify
as
as
an
part of the problem.
excuse. And they start asking kind of advanced, like, I want to know what my VO2 max is and like all
Hmm.
this stuff when I'm thinking, well, let's get a few miles in and we'll start to analyze numbers afterward because I think they're getting a little bit ahead of themselves, wanting too many numbers.
Right. Yeah. I
Yeah.
love the data, but the fact of the matter is, for an athlete of my caliber, a lot of that data is it's just for fun. It's not really
Yeah.
informing much of anything. It's not going to change my training plan.
Yeah, so
Those
the
numbers
so
are
maybe
not.
the focus, is let's get to those miles, let's get to the 10 miler and we'll start analyzing those numbers, but that if you're having a hard time getting out the door, then I feel like you probably don't need to worry too much about the number. Let's get
Right.
more into the what's motivating you, what's getting you energized to do this, and do you have the right reasons for why you want to do it?
Hmm.
Um, because it takes time.
So
Some people who haven't done it, like myself, that it took a few weeks to actually start enjoying it, where
sure.
it seemed forced, like just I want to prove that I can do this. And all of a sudden, the fourth or fifth week is like, wow, I feel amazing.
Hmm.
I want to do more of this.
Absolutely.
That's the thing with running is it's about when people start, you just have to keep them at it for as long as possible, I think. And if they can make it to that, and you probably see this with your athletes, if they can make it to a certain that 4 or 5 week mark, that's when you're going to start to actually find some enjoyment in it. Because I know that there is that perception that that runs rampant that like, oh, I just hate running. It's not fun. Why would I want to run? I hated running when I was a kid. Why do I want to do it now that I'm an adult? Do you encounter that quite a bit with when you have a new athlete coming to you? I mean, obviously
Oh
they're
yeah,
somewhat interested in running because they're coming to you. They want to coach. I mean, so obviously they're somewhat
yeah.
interested, but uh, do you observe them growing in their love for the sport maybe once you kind of get them out there and active for
Yes, and
weeks?
it happens a lot because I'm part of a triathlon club, and when you have triathletes, they usually have their favorite sport. Like I like cycling, but I hate running, or I hate
Hmm.
running and swimming. And so that's the challenge is just, hey, let's find ways that you can enjoy running more. Maybe it's you can play some music and start to get out of that comfort zone because for so long is like their mind is I rather be on the bike, but here I
Hmm.
am putting the miles on the run. And so just the perception, I think,
Hmm.
and just finding ways, hey, let's find ways in which we can make running more enjoyable. If you've been listening to podcasts like this one, let's listen
Yeah.
to music maybe instead.
Change it
Yeah.
up.
Change it up.
Change it
Exactly.
up. So how long is your typical marathon training plan?
Uh, typically 16 weeks
Okay.
if they have some experience. If not, then if there's going to be their first marathon, they're right, they want to do a marathon, then 6 months.
Okay. So
Good.
Yeah.
4 to 6 months would be kind of
Yeah.
the range. Because
Yes.
for me, I took on about a 4 month training plan. I was running 15 or 20 miles a week before I started the training plan, so it's not like I was starting from zero.
Right.
But when I got into my structured plan, it was about 4 months. So
Yeah.
that feels right for someone who's reasonably trained.
Yeah. And I don't think I've gotten someone who's just out of the blue decided to start running that didn't have some kind of already into workouts or into
Right.
health and fitness. It's very rare that they just woke up one day and says, I'm gonna run a marathon.
By the time you hire a coach, you're probably somewhat committed to the process to some degree. You're not just the person that was sitting on the couch the whole time, like, today's the day I'm gonna become a marathon runner.
Yes. Surely you've at
Yeah.
least done some 5Ks, 10Ks, something before you get to that point. But hey, there's
Yeah.
always there's somebody out there who went from zero to the marathon. Well, I mean,
Nothing wrong with
Yeah.
that.
No,
Victor, you
that's it.
said you said that you weren't much of a runner before you did your first marathon, right?
No, I was a UPS driver and it's kind of an athletic job. And I
Yeah.
still had some background. Like I liked my workouts were boxing. I used to love boxing. So I did a little bit of amateur boxing.
Oh wow, cool.
But still, running wasn't my favorite thing to do, even with the boxing workouts. But but yeah, and what my sister did, and yeah, my sister challenged me and was like, "Yeah, let's do it." Went out and tried it and said, "Okay, no, I can't run," because I told you earlier, I thought
Right.
the marathon was going to be in 2 weeks, and it's like, no, I can't run 26 miles in two
Yeah.
weeks. And then no, he said, "Dummy, the training starts in 2 weeks," but it was a six
Yeah.
month training plan for the LA Marathon.
Yeah.
So Victor, as we kind of wrap up here, yeah, you've already shared a couple, of course, but do you have another story of someone that you really, something kind of inspirational, someone that you really helped just hit it out of the park, one of your athletes that you'd like to share with us?
Yeah, where one of my athletes it turned into more of a life coaching because she went through a lot of things, including brain surgery.
Oh, wow.
So even though she stopped running, we were still having sessions on life coaching. Because when I started doing coaching, I thought I was going to be a life coach at
Oh,
first. And then it's like, okay, that's a little bit out of my comfort zone.
hmm.
Mm, I want to do something that I already am good at, and I'm good at marathon training. And if I can
Sure.
incorporate life coaching, then I will do that. And I think with her, we did a lot of that, and we just kept doing sessions and sessions. She's recovering, she's back to running, but
That's
we
incredible.
did more than a year in life coaching. So I found that very inspiring for myself that I can help somebody not just in their running. And I think that's where I connect the dots where this is more than just training people to run, is incorporating everything that's going on in their lives because everything affects everything. Just like you were saying earlier, that everything's connected. Well, so in our lives, if we're going through some heavy stuff, uh, running can be therapeutic,
Absolutely.
but our performance, we should really not expect to perform at the same level and give ourselves some space to deal with whatever we're dealing with
Hmm.
in our
Good
lives.
point. It's a really good point.
Absolutely. And Victor, if our listeners are interested in reaching out to you, maybe for some coaching or some advice, where can they find you?
Oh, they can go to my website, eymcoaching.com. I have a free training plan that they can download, get them started. And
Excellent.
if they want to connect with me, they can schedule a coaching call.
Great.
And on Instagram also, and on Instagram, EYM Coaching USA.
Great.
So those two.
And we'll have those links in the show notes and more information available there for anyone that is interested in engaging Victor for marathon coaching. Finally, we always like to ask guests as we wrap up. What motivates you to do it? What is your why?
Staying healthy and runner's high.
The runner's
There
high,
you
man.
go.
There's nothing like it. There is nothing
Yes.
like it.
I get creative. I have clarity of mind and I come up with ideas. Some of them are just crazy, and some of them I'm like, oh, I'm going to explore that idea and incorporate it either to my coaching or to something. But the creative juices when I'm in the runner's high are huge, and I like to capitalize on those.
You ever stop to
Yeah.
write something down when you're in the middle of a long run? I
No, I
do.
haven't done that yet. I
I've
just as
done
soon as
it.
I come home, yeah. You have?
I've stopped and sent myself an email because I came up with a eureka moment. I was like, oh, I need to hang on, email myself so it doesn't fall out of my head. So I'm
Awesome.
with you. I love the mental space that I get into on my long runs is it's really unique to that experience, and that's part of what keeps me going as well. I
Oh.
really appreciate that a
I
lot.
have to take my AI running now. It's like, yeah, hey Siri, can you make a note of this?
There you
Yeah,
go.
there you
There you go.
go.
Even better. Then you don't have to stop that way. So,
Yeah,
Yeah.
that'd be cool.
right. Yeah, awesome. Well, Victor, we really appreciate you taking the time to talk with us. This was a real pleasure. Thank you very
Thank you. The
much.
pleasure was mine. I
Yeah.
loved talking to you guys. You guys are fun to talk with, and I hope we
Thank
can
you.
do this again.
I look forward
Thank
to it.
you. Yeah.
Absolutely. You volunteer to come back. We will absolutely take you up on it. So we
Absolutely.
appreciate
Thank
that.
you so much. I love this.
Thank you for listening. Please make sure to like or subscribe on Apple, Spotify, or wherever you get your podcasts. We also list the show notes and have lots of bonus content available on Substack or Instagram.